Even CNN can't spin this one. Trump just pulled off what they said was impossible. A trade deal so devastating to European bureaucrats, they're calling it historic. For decades, Europe played America like a ATM machine. They dumped their subsidized products, destroyed our markets, and laughed while we picked up the check. Well, not anymore. From his Turnberry golf course, Trump just rewrote the rules of global trade. Former critics are calling it genius. Economists are stunned. The establishment that said his tariff threats would never work, well, now they're eating their words, and the details are going to shock you. So stay right there. And just like Trump is reshaping global trade to increase American strength, you can increase your body's circulation naturally. The American healthcare system is broken. Big pharma charges an arm and a leg, while insurance companies focus on growing spending. So I'm always researching natural solutions. One overlooked factor is improving blood flow. That means more oxygen to your brain, heart muscles, and everywhere that needs help as you age. I use Blood Flow 7 from Juvenon. It boosts nitric oxide levels 230%, opens arteries up to 62%. With one dose daily, it's improved my stamina, energy, focus, and supported my heart health without caffeine or stimulants. Visit bloodflow7.com/NNN to get more information. That's bloodflow7.com/NNN. Improve your circulation today. You'll find it linked in the description. Okay, so the KPMG chief economist says the EU trade deal is a win for Trump. This is on CNN. We're starting to see an end game emerge. Tariffs are reshaping supply chains with effects already hitting prices and employment, yet the biggest impact is still to come. Listen to this.
Here, having a deal, of course, I assume is better than not having one, but a 15% tariff is higher than the 10% baseline that Trump placed on the EU back in April 2nd. Who is this deal a win for?
Well, I think it is a win for the administration. In terms of our clients and what we're dealing with, they wanted to see some clarity, and we're starting to see an end game emerge, even though we're not to the end yet. In terms of what will tariffs be, how do we deal with our supply chains, how do we adjust to this new environment? And that is the next phase of this. And part of the reason everyone keeps saying, well, when are tariffs going to affect us? Well, they have. We've had the mother of all front-running tariffs that we've ever seen in terms of buying and stockpiling up and mitigating the effects of tariffs before they came in. But what's important is we're talking about moving the effective tariff rate in the United States from below 3% at the beginning of the year to what looks like will easily be double its current rate, which is around 9 to 10%, that people are starting to see sift its way into some of the consumer prices that we see out there and into employment. So the bulk of the effects are still ahead of us. It takes 6 to 18 months for these things to show up. We're not a full 6 months in all the way, but at least we're starting to see some clarity on where the end game likely will be, even though we don't have all those details even for this Friday, which is this Friday coming up, in terms of what all the details are. They're starting to get a sense of, okay,
so let's continue. Here's rapid response 47. Trump has done it. It's a complete win so far, says Megyn Kelly on the landmark EU trade deal with Victor David Hanson. Listen.
In tariff, it was one-sided. Our so-called friends, we got such a hard time for not being nice to. We're taking advantage of us, Victor. And now Trump's done it. He's taking in tariff income. He's getting them to invest in the country, and our companies get to sell their goods over there. I mean, it's a complete win so far.
It is. If I could just detour a bit, Megan, for 5 years I farmed full time, and I did it part time here on my farm for 15 years. And I grew raisins, and the EU subsidized and dumped their raisins with a $500 subsidy a ton. And it destroyed the raisin market in the 1980s. And my point is that when Reagan officials, whom I liked, came out to explain, you know what they said to us? This is good for you. Because this was the traditional economic exegesis that if they subsidize and we don't, then we're going to have kind of a Darwinian, only the strongest will survive, and that's good. And you'd say, well, you can't survive when they have a $500 dumping advantage. And then they'd say, well, they won't be able to sustain it. And they did sustain it. And then they'll say it's going to lower prices for Americans that if you get less, and it didn't. Dealing with this economic orthodoxy for a long profit margin was for the Japanese, the Chinese, the Europeans in this market. It could have been 20 or 30, but my point is that they apparently have calculated that as long as it's 15%, they're going to make plenty of money without having to raise prices and get in a trade war as the entry charge to get into this huge consumer market. And everybody said that's not true, but apparently they have made a calculated decision that they will make plenty of money, pay the tariff, and be here.
It was one-sided.
Win, win, win. Let's see. Here's President Trump hosting Keir Starmer at Trump Turnberry for a meeting. Thank you very much. You've done a great job.
The trade deal. Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And you've done a fantastic job with regard to the trade deal. You know, they wanted a trade deal here for years, many years, through many different terms of different people, and you got it done. So I want to congratulate you on that. And it's a great deal for both. It brings unity. We didn't need unity, but it brings us even closer together. I think it's good for both parties. Thank you very much, Mr.
President Trump, very happy. Here is CNN. Jeff Zeleny. This is the biggest trade deal in President Trump's effort to reshape the global trading order.
Isabel, the bottom line is this is the biggest trade deal in President Trump's effort to effectively reshape the global trading order. That has been one of his central priorities since taking office in January. He's been issuing many threats of tariffs, but they clearly have been working in terms of bringing other countries, allies and adversaries alike, in some cases, to the negotiating table. And the latest example was today here in Scotland when the leader of the European Commission, who of course is negotiating for the European Union, she agreed to a 15% across-the-board tariff. Now that is significantly higher than the 10% tariffs in existence now, but it's much lower than the 30% threat that was coming on Friday and the 50% threat that was made in May. So clearly there has been an instance where the president has been using his threats of higher tariffs as a negotiating tactic, and in this case, it certainly worked. Isabel, the bottom line is
in this case, it certainly worked. Okay, what have we got here? Former Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez on the breakthrough U.S. trade deal.
Ago. On this deal, the European Union, this is a big win for the U.S. And if you look at where this was 3-4 weeks ago, you could see that there was a lot of hardball towards the end there. On this deal, the European Union, this is a big win.
Here's Terry Hines on the landmark EU-U.S. trade deal.
I think it's a triumph of a lot of things. Certainly, the president ought to take a victory lap. I think it ends up being good for the European Union. It's a blow against the conventional wisdom, which, of course, in the last quarter saw a lot of this as disastrous. The markets see the fact of the deal and the ratification of trade and the expansion of trade as the most important thing. And number one. Number two, I think there's a situation here where, as you've alluded to in your questioning with Tyler, that the geopolitical element of this also remains front and center, whether we're talking about the continued interdependence of the U.S. and European Union economies, or whether we're talking about investments in the United States and purchases of military equipment. You're seeing a tightening of the alliance, and I think, frankly, an attempt by both parties to push back a bit against China. It's a triumph.
Pushing back against China. Even MSDNC can't cope with how much America won with the EU trade deal. Gunther Eagleman writes, I think they're tired of all the winning, just like Trump said they would be. It's incredibly favorable for the United States. I mean, you look at this, it's been very one-sided. Even MSDNC.
They emerge fine.
The U.S. take any hits with this deal? And what does it say, this outcome say about the president's ability to negotiate?
It's incredibly favorable for the United States. And if you look at this, it's been very one-sided. I mean, the U.S. has been making the demands. These other countries have had to kind of contort and comport themselves to them. So they emerge fine here. But what's going to change is over the next weeks and months, as countries and trading partners like the EU look at this episode and think, can we trust this relationship with the U.S.? Can it continue? I think even looking at this deal, framework of which we don't have a ton of details. If that somehow goes south or changes, what's a trading partner like the EU to do? So we see them broaching new relationships with their other trading partners, looking for other opportunities. And I think that's going to be kind of the message here going forward. What's the legacy of these talks, of these threats going to be? And how are other countries going to kind of look at trade going forward? How are they going to change their tack now after all of this?
China is still a big question mark, and we know there are talks happening today, right, in Stockholm. Where do things stand there?
So we heard from the president this.
The U.S. take any hit?
President Trump could take a victory lap, and if you got value for this report, tap subscribe. My final thought is next. So this is what winning looks like. While career politicians talk, Trump acted. He weaponized tariffs like a master chess player, forcing Europe to finally play fair after decades of ripping us off. Victor David Hanson, he knows the EU subsidies destroyed American raisin farmers in the 80s. Now multiply that across every industry. For years, we got surplus from them, deficits for us. Trump just flipped the table. Even Trump haters like CNN admit it was the biggest trade victory in modern history. Megyn Kelly called it a complete win. Former critics taking victory laps. The establishment is threatening tariffs, said threatening tariffs would backfire. Instead, it brought Europe to their knees. This is not economics, it's respect. So here's the question. Is Trump the greatest trade negotiator in presidential history? Yes or no? And drop a comment. We'll continue the conversation. And you can show your American pride with Next News merch. You'll find it linked below where you can trigger a liberal today. It's shop.nextnewsnetwork.com.